with the Trans Bill of Rights. We are laying out a comprehensive vision to provide protections for transgender and non-binary people.
Transgender and non-binary people. That's how you now know this is a joke. Guys, up first, we've got to check in with the Democrats in Congress, both in the Senate and the House. And with so much of the Trump administration's basically public relations being in turmoil between the Epstein files and overreach on different issues, the Democrats have come together and decided to be normal and present a sane alternative to the American people that shows, like, we're not crazy, we're not out of touch with reality, you can trust it. Just kidding. Just kidding. I almost had you fooled there for a second, didn't I? No, many prominent elected Democrats in both the House and the Senate have instead decided that now is the perfect time to rally behind and promote a so-called Transgender Bill of Rights, which also includes non-binary people. Don't you dare for a second think that the they-thems are left out of this. That goes far beyond what any, reasonable, freedom-minded American would be cool with, which is adults who identify as trans, living however will make them happiest, and instead would enshrine, basically, if actually carried out, it's just a resolution, but if actually carried out, would enshrine every nonsensical, far-left, extreme gender activist idea into our laws, and is almost beyond parody in its scope and some of the things that it quite openly states. We're going to take a look at it in some detail today. First, though, I'll just show you a clip from one of the main sponsors of the legislation, or the legislative resolution, technically speaking, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. Here she is speaking about it.
Too often when we discuss trans rights, we're on the defensive, discussing how to protect trans people from horrific Republican attacks and how to ensure that trans people can live authentically in our communities.
Okay, just to pause for a second of context. There are definitely some genuinely hateful people just attacking and mocking all trans people, but some of these attacks they're talking about are literally just laws that say no biological males in female sports, or laws that say you have to be 18 to medically transition. And that's not a hate crime. Like, that's not a vicious attack on trans people. That's common sense compromise legislation. And the failure to parse those two things out and to draw those distinctions is one of the reasons the Democrats have lost so totally on this issue and this question lately. And these lawmakers don't seem to be changing course at all. Let's keep listening.
Our communities. Today, though, we are not on the defensive. We are looking forward with the Trans Bill of Rights. We are laying out a comprehensive vision to provide protections for transgender and non-binary people. A vision that...
Pause. Transgender and non-binary people. That's how you now know this is a joke. And that's how you know this is so deeply unserious. Non-binary is not a real thing. It is not even a quantifiable or coherent idea. Adults or just people who have severe gender dysphoria is one thing that it has existed. We can certainly talk about the spread of it and the new forms of it and people who claim to have it without actually having any diagnosis. But it's at least there's a real underlying phenomenon there that's been studied for many years. Non-binary doesn't mean anything. Oh, I just don't feel male or female in my gender presentation. Explain that without doing sexism, right? Because there are only two human sexes, male and female, and then there are very rare genetic conditions where people can be intersex, but even most of them can technically be qualified as male or female based on the structure of their reproductive system. But that's like almost a red herring when they bring that up, because that's not most non-binary or trans people. And so to say, oh, well, I don't feel male, what, because you don't like stereotypically masculine things? Or I don't feel female, I want to be they, I'm not a female. Why? Because you don't want to wear a dress or makeup? Like, that's fine. You don't have to do that. And if your identity suggests otherwise, then it's actually perpetrating gender stereotypes and sexism. So it's not a real or coherent concept. It's a pure fad, just a made-up identity that people adopt as kind of a social trend and to cash in on the victimhood currency of social media. But yet they're lumping that in with something that's apparently worthy of federal civil rights protection. So sorry, Black people, right? Your civil rights protection, sorry, gay people, your civil rights protections are the same thing as a she/they in bio. What a joke. And honestly, guys, there's a decent chance that my little rant against non-binary there is going to get this YouTube video demonetized, as I've had when I tell the truth about non-binary, sometimes I get demonetized for hate speech, but I'm okay with that. But do consider becoming a channel member to support my content. Hit the join button or the link in the description and sign up to support me. You'll unlock early access to ad-free full-length episodes with no annoying YouTube mid-rolls, and you'll help support me dropping truth bombs on the they-thems when YouTube seems not to like it. But regardless, make sure to subscribe to the like button, and let's keep going here. We'll listen to the rest of what the Congresswoman has to say.
That ensures that every single person has a chance to thrive. A vision that says, you are us, you belong, and you are worthy of the same rights as everyone.
And of course, like, I agree with that part. I do believe all Americans, trans or not, confused about being non-binary or not, are entitled to the same rights and freedoms 100%. But this is the kind of rhetoric that they'll use, and then what they're actually proposing is something very different. So we're going to go through the actual substance. I went and read this congressional resolution, the so-called Transgender Bill of Rights, and I expected it to be kind of crazy, but it's actually like way worse and way more explicit than I thought it would be. I do want to show you one video of the Senate sponsor, Democrat Ed Markey from Massachusetts, I believe. He decided to team up with a trans influencer, to make content promoting this legislation. Let me know if you recognize this person, and then after I'll tell you why you might.
Today is a very exciting day because you're introducing to the Senate the Transgender Bill of Rights, which will mandate federal protections of transgender people. What do you hope that this legislation will accomplish for transgender people across the nation?
Well, we want to put transgender issues right on the front burner of American politics in order to make sure that they have equal protections in their schools, in their places of employment, in healthcare, in all of the protections which they are entitled to. Trans rights are human rights, and that the day will come when we'll look to the history books to find that we ever had such a debate on whether or not the trans community was entitled to all of the protections that are built into our Constitution.
There's so much to unpack there. I mean, for one, the idea that you're he's a Democratic senator from Massachusetts, so he's got a safe seat. His swing state colleagues must despise him, must hate him, because to say something like, we should be putting trans issues at the forefront for the Democratic Party, is such absurdly foolish, like, political strategy for anybody not in a deep, deep blue district or state that they represent, because on a lot of these issues, Democrats are very out of touch with common sense in the public, and he's like, yeah, let's do it. And I find it laughable to suggest that, like, oh, we'll look back at the different debates over trans issues, and the people who were against it we'll look back and we'll marvel there ever was a debate. Kind of how we view, like, segregation now is the implication that I pick up on there. We look back and we're, like, kind of astonished that large swaths of people could ever really think that it made sense to have blacks only and whites only schools and water fountains and all of this. I almost think he's drawing that parallel, or that kind of parallel, and I'm sorry, but that is certainly not going to be the case. In fact, I think it's more likely that history will remember the people that stood 10 toes down on unproven experimental medical transition of minors will be viewed how we more similar to how we view the lobotomy now. And maybe the idea that we actually allowed biologically male people to compete in women's sports and biologically male sex offenders to be placed in women's prisons in blue states like California and Massachusetts, yeah, I think that will actually age like milk and be viewed as on the wrong side of history, not the people who had questions and concerns about it. And sorry, I got a little bit off track there, but I want to talk about the person that you see in this video, the transgender influencer. Well, this is an influencer named Rose Montoya. And this is a curious choice of person for the Democratic lawmaker, the senator here, to team up with, because Rose Montoya is the transgender influencer that President Biden invited to the White House, and then the influencer flashed that, I guess her, if we're being polite and using this person's pronouns, but her prosthetic breasts at the White House for a photo. And it was this whole controversy. It embarrassed the Biden administration. But to their credit, they banned Rose from the White House. And Ed Markey and his team are like, you know who we should team up with for this? That trans influencer who flashed people at the White House. Like, it's almost beyond parody that they would do this, that they would pick these people of all the messengers to team up with to make content about it. It's just bizarre. Maybe they didn't do their due diligence, but wow. And then when you get into the substance of this resolution, it is really astonishing stuff. And over 50 or more, dozens and dozens of Democratic lawmakers co-signed this, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's kind of a rising star in the Democratic Party and possibly a 2028 nominee, maybe for the presidency or maybe for the VP slot. And let's just look at the text without further ado. So here's the first part that stood out to me. Where they suggest that transgender and non-binary people face significant barriers to legal recognition of their truest selves on government-issued documentation and identification that reflects their gender. So this stood out to me because it's like, I wasn't aware this was a thing that existed. The idea that you were entitled to legal recognition of your truest self. And I would love to know if there is a limiting principle on that, because I've always found it bizarre, this idea that a non-binary person who claims to be non-binary is entitled to have government documents reflect their denial of reality because it's their truest self, even though it's actually like literally false. So that's an interesting dichotomy there. But is there a limit to that? Like, not to stretch it to the point of absurdity, but sometimes that can be useful for testing an argument. Like, if I identify as a dog, should I be able to have my species listed as dog? But aren't I entitled to my truest self being it's kind of a microcosm of this affirmation without limit principle that I think is embedded into a lot of progressive thinking about these issues. Okay, next part that stood out to me. President Trump has issued several executive orders that attempt to unlawfully discriminate against transgender people. Anti-trans individuals strive to deprive transgender and non-binary people of access to gender-affirming care, despite the overwhelming consensus of the medical community that gender-affirming care is essential, safe, and life-saving health care. So this was an interesting statement to me because I find it insanely gaslighty and bizarre how many of the same Democrats who told us for years, trust the science and trust the experts, when frankly we probably should not have nearly been so deferential to the science and the experts, are now actively like just refuting what actual evidence and medical consensus and literature suggests. There is not evidence proving that gender-affirming care is life-saving for non-binary people. Which it doesn't even make sense why a non-binary person would want or need gender-affirming care, by which they mean different chemical or hormone therapies as well as surgeries and the like. But there's not evidence proving that that is life-saving. Even with transgender care, more traditional transgender care, the evidence is very low quality, even for adults. Now, I'm a believer that you own your body and should be able to do almost anything with it, up until the point when you start hurting someone else. So I have absolutely no issue with trans adults getting surgeries or taking hormones if that's what they want to do. But when they're making claims definitively that this is life-saving care, those are not evidence-based claims, especially, but actually all around, as applied to minors. It is not an evidence-based claim to claim that this treatment is life-saving for trans minors, yet they repeat this ad nauseum. There is no actual evidence to support that claim. And even the ACLU admitted before the Supreme Court that they had no proof of that claim. So I just thought that stood out. Next year, they say, The federal government has a duty to protect the rights of transgender and non-binary people by implementing a Transgender Bill of Rights that includes ensuring that transgender and non-binary people have equal access to services and public accommodations that align with their gender identity, by amending the Civil Rights Act to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex, including gender identity and sex characteristics, in public accommodations and federally funded programs and activities, and expanding the definition of public accommodation to address the full range of places and services that members of the general public utilize. That might sound like not particularly controversial, because I would agree in general that like it's wrong to have your restaurant say like, we don't serve trans people or anything like that. Certainly would not ever be okay with that form of discrimination, but that's actually a breathtakingly radical stance they just suggested, that essentially all public accommodations and services, by which they mean public businesses and the like, have to be open to everyone according to their gender identity. The practical consequence of that, as we have seen in blue states, is that locker rooms are for women, spas, like Korean spas that are nude only for women, any man or male who simply says they feel like a woman at that moment, no diagnosis, no treatment, no anything. Or they don't even have to say they feel like a woman. They could say they feel like a non-binary, in California at least, and they are entitled to walk into whatever women's changing room or locker room or nude spa or space they feel like. That is insane. And that actually puts the whims of random people, some of whom are not, many of whom have no ill intent, but many people of ill intent will take advantage of such a system, puts that over the basic comfort and safety and dignity of women. And so it's the kind of thing that it's astonishing these people support, and just flies under the radar how actually radical that it is. Furthermore, another piece from this resolution: amending federal law to ensure it protects students from discrimination based on sex, including gender identity and sex characteristics. Now, I'll pause on that just to say it seems kind of contradictory to me. How can how can laws protect on the basis of discrimination of sex and gender identity when those two things are in direct conflict? Or they're the opposite of each other in the cases that we're talking about here. But anyway, thus guaranteeing the right of students to participate free from discrimination, including harassment and sexual violence, in all areas of school life, including in classes, extracurriculars, including athletics, access to facilities, and other school activities. Of course, and this is the problem, that they like lump in utterly uncontroversial things with extremely controversial things. Nobody, trans or not, should ever be harassed or subjected to sexual violence, of course. However, this resolution also says that no one should ever be denied access to athletics because of their gender identity, which means women's sports are no longer for females, and biologically male athletes are able to compete at the high school or collegiate level. And that's crazy. That's unfair. In some cases, that's unsafe. And it's an 80-20 issue that these Democrats are once again doubling down on. So if you thought they were learning, if you thought they were waking up, that at least does not apply to the dozens and dozens of Democratic politicians who have co-signed this statement. Up next, they write that they want to clarify and reaffirm the right to bodily autonomy in healthcare for transgender and non-binary people. And then the second part of this says, by eliminating unnecessary governmental restrictions on the provision of and access to gender-affirming medical care and counseling for transgender and non-binary adults and adolescents. Emphasis on that last part, because I do agree with the first part. I like I said, adults, freedom, do what you want with your own body. But adolescents, so 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, should not be chemically castrating themselves, should not be getting double mastectomies. All of this is barbaric. It is not supported by evidence. They cannot understand the lifelong decisions and their ramifications that they are making. And yet Democrats who signed this document and are standing on this, they think that should be legal. That is what that statement very clearly means. And I think that's astonishingly ignorant and extreme. But hey, I love this. They also wrote, as part of their Transgender Bill of Rights, codifying the right to abortion for everyone. I'm not even trying to give my hot take on abortion here. I'm just saying I find this thing that Democrats do annoying, where they make everything about everything. Abortion is a totally separate issue from trans. Could you just not conflate it's like so annoying. Another piece here that I just love, they require that an X marker be available on federal government identification and records that require gender. Yeah, I'm sorry, that I'm going to crash out if I think about that for more than a second. No human being's sex is X. It even intersex people that doesn't apply to, but the people getting this on their passports were basically never intersex. So that's kind of, once again, a red herring. So what we're doing is we're saying that you have a right to list inaccurate information on government documents. I'll never get that. That will always strike me as absurd. Now, the final piece here cracked me up because, like, you're never woke enough. They say the federal government must make an ongoing commitment to the rights of transgender and non-binary people. Policies concerning transgender rights must be led and informed by transgender communities, in particular Black and Indigenous women, due to their intersecting identities. I hate it here so. Imagine being a Democrat and having to flagellate yourself like this. Listen to Indigenous, trans, women of color. Oh my God. Or just listen to people who make sense. What a crazy thought, regardless of their identity. And I'm sorry, but if they're so clearly pandering, and they so clearly do not mean a word of this, because if they did, then this white dude wouldn't be on stage giving all these remarks about it and everything. The straight white dude from Massachusetts. How about you shut up and let a queer, non-binary, trans, Indigenous woman of color take the stage? Call in Blossom, okay? They actually don't mean it. It's just obvious pandering, and it is really, really breathtaking stuff. Part of me had kind of hoped, though I never really believed this, that Democrats were going to chill out and be a little more moderate and normal. And I think some of them are, but many are not. And many seem deeply captured by some of this radicalism. And that is really concerning for the future of the country, because we need a sane alternative to the Republicans. But at least among these folks from this resolution, that is not what we have. That's my take, at least. But you guys will have to let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure subscribed if you aren't yet, to hit the like button, and please consider becoming a channel member if you haven't yet.